There is a house in North America where the front door is in the United States, and the bedroom is in Canada. There is a library where you can sit in two countries at the same time. And there is a street where one side of the road is American, and the other side is Canadian. This is not fiction. This is the US-Canada border, and it is one of the strangest, most fascinating lines ever drawn on a map. 5,525 miles long, the longest international border on Earth. And yet, for most of its existence, it had no wall, no fence, no military, nothing. Just a strip of tape on a library floor. But that is changing. Right now, in 2025, this border, which was once called the friendliest boundary in the world, is at the center of one of the biggest geopolitical tensions in modern history. Tariffs, threats of annexation, a library that two countries are now fighting over. How did we get here? And what does this border actually look like up close? The story starts in 1783, with a treaty, a terrible map, and a line that nobody could agree on. When the American Revolution ended, the British Empire and the new United States sat down to divide North America. The problem was simple. Nobody had properly explored it. The maps being used were wrong. The rivers were in the wrong places. The lakes were the wrong size. And the diplomats drawing the border had never set foot in most of the land they were dividing. So they guessed. And those guesses created some of the strangest geographical situations on Earth. Situations that still exist today, that real people still live inside every single day. Take Point Roberts, Washington, because the border follows a perfectly straight line along the 49th parallel. The southern tip of a Canadian peninsula accidentally ended up in the United States. The result? A small American community with no land connection to America. To drive from Point Roberts to any other part of Washington state, you have to leave the United States, drive through Canada, and then re-enter the United States. American children who grow up there cross an international border twice a day, just to go to school. Or consider the Northwest Angle in Minnesota, a patch of American land completely surrounded by Canada on 3 sides and a lake on the 4th. It exists because a surveyor in the 1700s placed the source of the Mississippi River in the wrong location on his map. That mistake was written into a treaty, and that treaty has never been corrected. The people who live there, American citizens, can only reach the rest of their own country by driving through a foreign nation or crossing a lake. And then there is Darby Line, Vermont, the town where the border does not just pass through. It runs down the middle of the main street. Residents named it Canusa Avenue, half in Canada, half in the United States. It cuts through living rooms, it cuts through backyards, and most famously, it cuts straight through the middle of a public library. The Haskell Free Library and Opera House was built in 1904 by a woman named Martha Stewart Haskell. She built it deliberately on the border, so that it would belong equally to both countries. The entrance is in Vermont. The books are in Quebec. The border is marked by nothing more than a strip of black tape on the hardwood floor. For over a century, Canadians and Americans walked in from either side, read books, watched opera performances, and went home. Nobody checked a passport. Nobody asked questions. That is what this border looked like for most of its history. 2 countries, 1 continent, and an almost stubborn refusal to make the boundary feel like a barrier. But September 11th, 2001, changed everything. Overnight, the border that had been treated as a friendly formality became a national security priority. Steel gates appeared on residential streets in Derby Line. Crossing points that had been casually walked through for decades suddenly required documentation. The atmosphere along the entire 5,525-mile line shifted from neighborly to watchful. And in 2025, it shifted again. U.S. authorities moved to restrict Canadian access to the Haskell Library entrance. The door that had been open to both countries for 120 years. The town of Stansted, Quebec, called it a unilateral decision. A U.S. senator from Vermont called it troubling. The library that was built as a monument to friendship found itself caught in the middle of a relationship that had broken down in ways its founder could never have imagined. Because this is what has happened to the US-Canada border in the last 2 years. US President Donald Trump threatened to annex Canada entirely, to absorb it as the 51st state of the United States. Tariffs were imposed. Trade relationships that had run smoothly for decades were disrupted overnight. A border that handles 400,000 crossings every single day, and more than $700 billion in annual trade, suddenly became the front line of a political confrontation between two countries that had not confronted each other like this in living memory. The line on the map has not moved. But what it means to the people who live beside it, to the governments on either side of it, and to the world watching from a distance, is changing faster than at any point in the last 100 years. The tape on the library floor is still there. The border still runs through the middle of a reading room. But the question that nobody could have imagined asking even 5 years ago is now sitting in the air on both sides of that line. What happens to the world's longest peaceful border when the peace starts to break?